My name is Jane McIlvaney Kuntz, and today we are doing the second half of Cafe Scenes. And I'm going to check to make sure that this is recording. So give me 1 second. Okay, I think we're good. Last week we blocked in, and as you can see, we have this light here that's coming across, lighting up the backs of people, the tops of their heads, the tops of their shoulders. It's also streaming onto the patio, and it pulls you through the painting, which I think is very nice.
Jane, could you, I cannot see the left part of the photograph, so if you could, you need to move it to the right a little more.
Is that better?
A little more to the right. But I can't see the light.
How's that?
That's better.
Okay. The thing I always say, remember, you always ask yourself, what is this painting about? And that way it helps you focus on the focal point and not about the stuff that's irrelevant. So this painting is about diners at an outdoor cafe, looks like maybe evening, with the lights hitting them. It's not about the stuff up here. It's not about this awning. It's not about all the signs in the windows. And so you have to resist doing all that minutia detail because that takes away from your painting. The more impact you have is when you do less. Less is more. So the first thing I always like to do is to see if there's anything that I need to fix. Like I put something down, it's not in the right place, or I left something out I need to put in. I check for those things first. And I noticed a couple things. One, with this little window here, you can see the underside of the building. I mean, the front side is lit. Then there's this little part in the inside before you see the window. I didn't even put that in there, so I need to put that in there. I mean, that's minor. I also, if you look at this little yellow bar here, there's shadow falling across it, except the light hits sort of over here. So I put it in, but it's not noticeable enough. So I'm going to redo that a little bit. The other major thing I did that I don't like is I put a woman over here sitting at the table, and if you look right under her table, I have a pot. I'll pull this closer so you can see. I have this pot. These flower pots are going to have little green trees in them. Well, if I put a green tree there, it's going to cover her up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this pot over a little bit this way so that the green tree will be here. It will keep people in the painting because the green tree will stop people from leaving. Because if I put the green tree here and cover her up, then we've got this white table that's going to attract the eye. So I decided to move that. And when I decide to move things, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a piece of either white pastel or a pastel pencil, and I just kind of plan where I'm going to move it. Now in this case, that pencil doesn't want to work. This is a pastel pencil. I'm just going to move it over a little bit, and I'm just drawing so that I know where to put it. I want these to be in line. Notice here's the bottom of this pot, bottom of that pot. I want them to be in line because that diagonal will make for a nice way of pulling you in. So the tree is going to be over here more and hopefully keep people, and I'm going to keep that tree kind of dark green, whereas this one might have some more lighter color greens on it just because it's getting closer to the light. And I think this painting really is about how the light hits the people and the tablecloths and that kind of stuff. So we're going to play that up a little bit too. And then I thought also I would talk about how you can add people. I'll take a piece of paper and show you basically how to do people. But I could even add like a waiter here if I wanted to with his back to us. But we'll see. Sometimes I finish a painting and then look at it and say, you know what, it needs something more. And then you can go and look through your photos and see if you can find a picture of a waiter or something that you can use. All right, so let's begin. I'm going to start first with putting in a little bit of the structure of the buildings and play up the lights and the darks. So if I'm playing up this little archway that's under there that I somehow didn't get in there, I'm going to just take a little bit of burnt umber, add a little bit of Naples to it, just so it's darker, but it's not black looking. I don't want it to attract too much attention. I'm going to just kind of put sort of a darker arch in there. That's the interior part of that window. It just gives the window a little more form. And like I said, there are a few shadows. I could probably use, I might add just a little bit of burnt sienna to that same mixture of burnt umber Naples. I'm just going to make a little shadow right here in the corner, kind of like a triangle. And I'm going to use that same color to just kind of put a little shadowy color right here. Just a little bit of darker color, just so that it looks like the light's hitting in some places, but not everywhere. Do I have to do this? No, not really. I just want to. And I'm going to put a little darker edge right there where the archway, comes into that area. Blend that in a little bit. Okay, now, I might want to play up the lights that I already have down there. I have cad yellow and white here, but I could take mostly white with a pinpoint of cad yellow, so that it's very, very pale, and just kind of put it on there, and I just brushed it, and I'm leaving it. Put it on there, brush it, and leave it.
Jane.
Yeah.
One thing that's bothering me,
Yep.
above that window,
Yep.
that light doesn't go over far enough to your left.
Yeah, it doesn't. I didn't do it exactly like that. I kept it a little bit in the painting. I was afraid if I got too close to the edge, it might pull you out. I pull it out a little bit, but I'm not going to take it all the way over there just because.
No, a little more.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you want to look at, I put this yellow down here. I might want to come back in and just take a sort of a little paint on it with a little dry brush and just lighten it a little bit more, just to kind of punch it out a little bit. And for some of these windows, I might not do anything. Others, there are some writing in there, and you want to be very careful that you don't get in there and try to spell stuff. We do what we call scribble writing. And what I mean by that is, like, there's a little red sign here. I just scribble suggestion that implies that it says something, but it doesn't really. Or here, there's a little sign, and I don't even know what that says, but it's probably better that I don't, because, a lot of times you just think, oh, I want to go in there and write that in there. No, just scribble. And if you do a little bit of this, people just say, oh, that's a sign. That's a sign in the window. I'm going to do one here too. It's kind of at a... But by scribbling, and sometimes you might just make a big T and then the rest of it scribble. Or you might make a big F and then you scribble. I mean, you can do that kind of thing too, where it does say a little recognition of a number somewhere, but not really, not much. Because, again, you're not trying to attract attention to that area, but it's nice to have a little bit of interest happening in there. So I'm just adding little dashes and dots of, this was a Naples and white. Now I use cad red to do a couple dashes, and then maybe I'll put a little yellow in the middle of that. Doesn't say anything, but it fills this up, and there's a little scribbly writing in here. It fills it up with something and becomes more interesting, but it doesn't really pull you away from the main event. You're not getting in here and reading. Like if you wrote John's Pizza and Pasta, you're going to see people sitting there reading the signs. That's not what you really want. You want people, maybe they notice it later, but they don't even notice it at first. It just kind of blends in. I might lighten this a little bit up here. Now, I might add another light here underneath this scalloped edge. I'll show you in the photograph. Notice that there are some lights peeking out from under here of this red one. The problem with putting these in way up here is they're way far away from the main event. And because that's bright yellow, it's going to attract attention. So I am not sure I want to do that. I think I'd rather have just a suggestion of a little light here or something. Maybe right here too, where you could just kind of put a little yellow in and streak a little light down. And I'm just dry brushing it. It has very little paint on it, but it kind of brightens that up. If I decide I don't like that, I can take that out. But what I'm trying to do now is punch things out. I've got a good base down. Now it's time to really punch things out a little bit. I'm going to make this a little lighter right there just so that it looks like that has more light on it. I might punch those out later. We'll see. The other place that light catches is, of course, on tops of heads and tops of shoulders. If when you blocked in you didn't quite get it, you can go back now. And sometimes the light might be a yellow ochre, like if this guy's head here, if I put yellow ochre, notice this pole is yellow ochre, it's not going to show up. So I don't want to use yellow ochre there. I'm going to use cad yellow and white and really put a bright highlight on the top of his head. Now that's very bright at first. We can wipe all the paint off of our brush, kind of soften the edge, and I might even go back in and take a little burnt sienna, burnt umber color, and just kind of put right next to that so I can have something to blend into. If you can't blend into it, what's going to happen is it's going to look very harsh. So a lot of times I'll just re-wet an area that I'm trying to put a highlight on.
Jane, have you put all the people in that you're going to have?
Maybe.
Okay. Sometimes
sure.
I don't do the highlights until I've put everybody in, but
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly, I mean, if you know you want to put more people in, I would do that first.
okay.
I'm not sure I'm going to put more people in. Oops.
All right.
So
Just wondering.
I'm going to just kind of play around with what I have. And a lot of times for highlights, I'll use things like either Naples and white, cad yellow and white, or ultramarine blue. I'm sorry, not ultramarine blue, cerulean blue and white. Because those colors really show up. But like I said, it's almost like if you put something down, you may have to re-wet the hair just to kind of blend it in a little bit. Now, I do like to go back and hit the shoulders of people because even though I put it down, sometimes colors kind of sink in. And when you do, don't get in there and lick, lick, lick. What I want you to do is come in, put it down boldly and leave it. Put it down boldly and leave it. Just be brave. You can always come back later if you decide you were too brave. You can always come back later and, you know, it's like this easel's about to drop. You can always come back later and, you know, tone it down or whatever. Be brave at first. And with skin, if they have, you know, bare shoulders showing, mix cad red, yellow ochre, and white, and you can even add like a little, if you have to, you can add a little Naples to it, but, you know, get it pretty light skin. I mean, we want it to look like light is hitting this lady's shoulder over here on the far left. So I can come in here and maybe right at her shoulder, put a little highlight. That might not be enough. It's not showing up. So go back in, add more white, and put it here. Just so that, again, try to blend it in a little bit. That she's starting to punch out a little bit. Maybe even on this shoulder too. Brighten it up a little bit. If it feels like it's not showing up, the other color you could use is cad orange. Cad orange is very bright and it does attract a lot of attention. So that can also be a good highlight for skin. Now, let's do one thing first. I'm going to move this pot, like I said, this pot's right in front of this lady, and when I put the tree in there, she's going to be gone. So I'm going to move the pot over. And then once we do that, we're going to come in and start working on the sidewalk to really work on the light coming through, streaming in. So I'm going to have a very hard time matching this color. Whatever I put in last week, it's not going to look exactly like what I had this in the block in. I'm using a little bit of, you know, ultramarine blue, kind of graying it a little bit, a little touch of burnt sienna. I'm sorry, a little touch of burnt sienna, a little touch of alizarin, just to kind of get that pot moved. Now, I drew with a pastel pencil, and so it has this hot purpley pink outline, which I can wet my finger once this dries, and it'll be gone. But now I've got to figure out what's going to happen in front of this lady. I'm just going to make a tablecloth that's not going to be catching light because here's the light coming this way. So that is too light. Let's see if we can get a little darker. Not too light. I'm going to add a little ultramarine blue, touch of burnt sienna, and some white. You also, if you have that Holbein violet gray, you could use that. So this is this is going to be the tablecloth. I'm just going to make it a little longer. And we've got to see something underneath that table, probably her legs or whatever. I'm just going to kind of fudge it and take a dark and just kind of get it dark under there for right now. We can come back in later if we want to add something.
Hey, Jane,
Mm-hmm.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
How about if you put a little dog?
Well, that'd be cute.
Yes, because that's what the French people do. They have
They
the
take their
dog
dog to, yeah, that's true.
at the restaurant.
That's a great idea. Yeah, a
Just
little
put
dog
the
would be
little dog
fantastic.
there.
Now, I will say this. If you're going to put a little dog in, don't make up a dog. Get a picture of a dog, because you can end up with something that looks like a little miniature elephant or something. You know, better to have a picture if you're going to use that. All right, now, we also have these trees in here, and we have lettering here on the awning. One thing about lettering, and in this case, you might want people to read this. Don't start with the first letter and start working your way over, because what will happen is you'll get over here and you'll realize, oops, I ran out of room. What I do is count how many letters are in the name that I'm going to put on there, and you don't have to put this name. You can make up any name. You could, you know, Chez Jean or Chez Jacques or whatever you want. And count how many letters there are and start in the middle and go this way with the letters and then go this way with the letters. And that way they will be evenly spaced in where you want them. That's just a little tip that I learned, because many a time I would start and then I'd run off and not have enough room and have to erase it. Another thing I could do is to make sure people stay in this area. I've got this blue awning, nothing happening. I could, as we get closer to the scene, I could take just a little bit of, this is just straight cerulean blue, and just dry brush it on here. It's very little on my brush. And just kind of put it close to where the people are. I wouldn't go up there, but what it'll do is just kind of, again, attract attention a little bit more to this area. Now with trees, I would put them in first with sort of a darker green, maybe ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, touch of burnt sienna. It's not really dark. Let me add a little bit more. You got to play with, when you're making greens, you think it looks dark and then you put it on there and it doesn't look dark at all. I want this one over here especially dark, because this is to keep people in the painting, kind of stop you from going out of the painting. And if you want a real dark, you could take add a little alizarin to that. And I do mean a little, not a lot, because alizarin's powerful. But it makes things look dark, you know. So you could come in here. This has alizarin with a little bit of the green mixture that I mixed up. And I'm going to wipe most of it off, and just what I put down, I'm just going to dry brush it up so that it kind of blends in a little bit. This tree here is getting close to her, so I want to be careful as I put that on. Here's the little tree. Now, their trees look like feathery, and I'm making mine more like a little mini cypress or something. What do you call those? Leyland cypresses. So there's a little mini tree. And you can decide how tall you want them. You might want them, like this one I had pretty tall. I could make this one a little taller, I guess. And again, the light's coming from here, so I might put just a little bit lighter color right here on the edge of this tree on this side. I could do that on this one too, I guess. Just to give it a little dimension, and also maybe make it a little darker on this side. Just subtly. I mean, the trees aren't the focal point, so don't spend too much time putting them in. We have one more pot here, and again, I want to decide, don't want to ruin this person, and I don't want to ruin that person. So as I put it in there, I'm going to be a little careful, and this one I might not make as high. I might kind of break up that table there, or whatever that yellow light is, and just kind of come up here and break that up, but then stop short of making it too tall. A little bit of
Jane,
dark.
you still recording?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you still recording?
I think so. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like it. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to put a little bit of lighter green on this side. And, you know, if you can't get your, I wouldn't use any cad yellow in these darker greens because it'll get really bright. But you can lighten it with a little bit of Naples or something. Put a little Naples in your mixture.
Those trees make all the difference.
Well, you know what they do is they kind of break up this line of just people. You're having some verticals now all of a sudden. I think it just adds a little more interest. Now, here's the part I think that's going to add the most interest, and that is the lights and the shadows. And this is very important because it's telling you, you know, what the power of these lights are. I love what the patterns on this floor. This is going to be a tricky color to mix because, and you're going to have to test stuff out. I would mix up sort of a light purpley blue. Well, this is going to be don't do anything black. See how it looks black under the table? Don't do it black. Just do it a really dark purple or something, or a dark blue-gray. Don't go black, because black attracts so much attention that everybody will be staring under the tables. I'm going to first start, well, that's light. Wow. I'm going to first start by putting the lights on, actually. And some of it looks a little yellowish, and some of it looks a little bit lavenderish. So for the yellowish, I'm going to start with Naples, and I'm just going to kind of dry brush it on and just kind of drag it. It's also on the other side of the table, so you're going to have to go in here and kind of work in between the table legs and the people legs and whatever else you had in there. Kind of begin to put some light in there. But just by doing that, it sort of opens up the painting a little bit and makes it, I think, feel like, yes, this light is really playing a great role in this evening mood. So I'm trying to stroke it sort of down, like a vertical down, because if I stroke it straight across, it's not going to show how the light is moving across this patio. And then look in other places, and it might not be as light as Naples yellow. You might then switch to more of a yellow ochre color. But in here, you might have a few little places of light peeking through too. And sometimes I look to see, is there a place where, like maybe even over here, just so that the light continues. And if it looks too bright, just take your finger and kind of soften it. I did put those yellow lights in last time, but there's another one in here somewhere, maybe right here. But having those little breaks of light, I think, can make it very pretty. And I'm dry brushing it, so it's not heavy paint, and I can easily, if I put it in the wrong space, I can get it out of there. I am going to switch to sort of more of a lavender color, and this might take a little more trying to get it correct, because I want it to be light, but not too light. And so I'm just, again, dry brushing it on here, and again, looking to see where obviously it's darker under the planters, but when you get to the other side of the planter, we can put this little bit of a lighter purpley blue. And maybe even on the other side of this planter, again. And what you're doing is you are pulling people through your painting by repeating this diagonal, by repeating these, and it's kind of a very interesting composition. You might even notice as you get back over here, maybe it looks, even, you might see other colors besides just yellows and lavenders. And then there's some little shadows. Let's go into the darker color shadows now. I am going to take ultramarine blue, pinpoint of alizarin, whoops, no, that wasn't a pinpoint, and I'm going to mix in with white, and I'm going to test it out to see how it looks. And I'm going to begin to put in where I think I see the shadow. So I see this sort of rounded shadow here. It's going back over here. And I want the edges to be very soft. No hard edges in these shadows. These shadows have got to be soft. And then as I come under this table, where it looks black in the photograph, I'm just going to use this darker purple color that I've mixed. And under these planters, I'm going to put a little darker semicircle. Remember, this is a rounded planter, so you can't put it straight across. It has to be a rounded half moon shape underneath that table. And again, pull the shadow as you see it. Over here, this is a little satchel or something somebody put by this one. Put a little shadow under there. And if, as you're doing this, you put shadow over here and no longer looks dark, you may have to just add more paint just so it's not quite as light as what was up front. And then this one, of course, would have a shadow. All of these are going to have shadows. Now, once you've done that, then you can come back and say, okay, where do I see some lights hitting? You might see a little light hitting on the rim of these planters. And again, you're just bringing a little bit of attention to them, but not tons. You're not doing a ton. We're going to put some highlights on, you can go back and add some highlights to chairs. If you see a little highlight on chairs and things like that. Anywhere that you see a little bit of light hitting, just for a little added interest, but it's not going to overpower. And again, if it looks too much, just take your finger and kind of soften it a little bit. I might come back also and really hit a little more highlight, maybe on top of a couple tables, just to kind of really show that the light is hitting here. And sometimes you just kind of have to look at the photograph and see where does it really look like bright. She's kind of far back, so I might not make hers as, although I put a light there. Put a little light there. And I think I'm going to, since I put her in there, I'm going to make that light above her just a little brighter now. Wasn't sure if I was going to keep those, but I think I am. So I'm trying to make sure that people can see the light. Hitting anywhere I think I see more light.
Jane, the contrast between that dark window you just touched up the light and the side of the wall, the background of the wall, it looks like a bigger contrast than in the photograph.
Mine, yeah.
The window looks darker and relative to the wall.
This window looks darker?
Yeah, does it draw too much of the eye toward it? Or are you okay?
It could, and here's some things you can do. Let's say you decide this is too dark for you. Instead of just getting in there and repainting the whole thing, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a color like maybe cerulean first, and I just gently drag a little bit over top of it. Cerulean is not a particularly light color, so it's not going to change the value too much of the window, but it will soften that real harsh darkness. So you could do something like that, or you could do it with a purple. Same with this. Let's say in here you decided, I think it's just too boring and bland. I mean, you can come in here and add, like I took a little cad red and put there. Maybe I'll take a little cad yellow and, but it's dry brush, so it's very little paint on my brush, just breaking that up. And then sometimes you might say, well, I wish I'd gotten a little darker maybe right here. So you could add a little, and again, you could drag that down too, just to suggest shadow. So always, if something bothers you, that means you need to fix it. If it doesn't bother you, you don't need to. I'm going to kind of integrate, because her tablecloth sort of looks disconjointed there. I'm going to see if I can integrate the light edge of that tablecloth with the rest of the tablecloth. I could kind of maybe make it might be sticking out too far. Maybe that's the problem. Let me just cut that in a little bit. Anytime you change something, it does affect other things. So she probably needs a little more work, and some of these other people might need a little more work. Underneath the table where this woman is sitting, I might do just a suggestion of like table legs or something. And I don't want them too light because I don't really want them to attract attention. I would also need to put a little shadow kind of under her table. Trying to keep all the shadows kind of going in the same direction. I'm going to let this one go off the canvas. The other thing that I can't do when I'm working here, but you should always do, is step back from your painting and take a look at it from a distance and see. There's some interesting little shadows caused by a chair. So, you know, if you feel like doing it, you can go ahead and put it in there. The thing is, you got to keep it soft. So when you put it in, brush it a couple times so it looks soft. You don't want to get in there and have a real hard-edged line. That should be a very soft shadow. If it's not a soft shadow, what will happen is it'll attract too much attention. There's also some other crisscrossy shadows going in here. And I may end up taking them out if I decide they attract too much attention, but we'll try and just see how it looks. This probably...
Is that because there's different light sources?
Yeah. There's different light sources. I mean, you think about it. This is a light source. This is a light source. This is... And actually, some of these probably put off some light, too, so... The other thing you might find, too, is after it dries, you may decide, you know, you want to play up that yellow a little bit more. I probably would be careful doing it, you know, right at the beginning, but when you look at it again later, look and see, does that need to be a little lighter or not? And again, I'm going to let these shadows, I'm just brushing back and forth to let them fade out and be very soft. Nothing really hard edge. The only place you would have a hard edge is right under the pot, maybe. You know, if you're trying to make this pot sit down on the ground, you could have a little darker shadow right there, right there, right there, maybe under this briefcase. But keep it kind of simplified. Okay, now, to finish this painting, I would probably come in here. You could add more people. Like, if you look at, here's these two guys sitting here, and then behind them are a couple more people. You could add a few people if you want, or you could leave them out. I mean, that's the type of thing that you can decide what you want to do. I definitely add a little writing. I think that always adds a little interest. You know, I took French many years ago, and I can't remember, is it le table or la table? But make sure you look it up and spell it right, because somebody who took French is going to tell you that's why you got a D in French. So spell, and you don't have to use this. You could say Cafe de Mer or you know, something like that. So make up any. You can even use something that has your name in it if you wanted to. You know, Cafe Gerda, that type of thing. I'm going to keep this from being too light right there. Now, I thought I would show you about adding people on.
Excuse me, Jane.
Yeah.
This would not be authentic because it would be a German restaurant. So this is the wrong country.
They don't have any German restaurants in Paris?
I'm just saying. Just kidding.
That's funny. Okay. I am going to add a few little more highlights. I just decided to add a few more highlights to like her shoulder. Like that one, a little here. Oops. Screw that one up a little bit. And, wow. Tell you, sometimes you get in there and you just do everything wrong. But that's the beauty of oil paint, is that you just come back in and cover it up. It's very forgiving. I'm going to just make this a little darker here. I think, too, his head needs a little highlight. I don't have one on him, and I have it on everybody else. So after I kind of fix his little suit jacket or whatever this is, let's put a little highlight on him. I'm going to use a little, like, Naples in white. The other thing, highlights show up better if they're against a darker background. So, for example, if this is dark, that highlight will show up better, whereas if it were a light background, that highlight wouldn't show up at all. I'm going to add some brown to kind of blend that in a little bit. It's not such a hard-edged. Maybe even her, top of her head should have a little highlight. Again, Naples in white, since she's a brunette, a lot of times you can just use a little bit of something like that to pop somebody's, maybe you can give her a little highlight. Highlights are what I call the dessert of a painting, that it's the part that makes the painting look really good. I'm going to fatten her arm up a little bit. Her arm looks a little long. I might pull the table up a little. Highlights are the dessert of a painting, and that's why you save them for last, because you've got to get all the foundation in first. But they do make the painting come alive and really zing. You know, just it pops the painting. So I'm pulling that table up a little bit. The other thing I want you to notice is if you're adding people and you're using another photograph to add people, remember that all their heads are going to be about the same level, because most people, when they're sitting, are, let's say, instead of being 5'5", they're now maybe at the 4'8" level or something, or somewhere in that range. But they're all going to be similarly the same level, unless a person is standing up. If there's a waiter standing up, like you could put a waiter in here or something, you're going to put a waiter here. Make him face that way, though, because you don't want him facing out of the painting. But it would, what was I going to say? Lost my train of thought. Oh, about the heads. They're all going to be at the same level unless somebody's standing. And if you have a bunch of people standing, they're all going to be at about the same level. This is, you know, something that, too, when you're at this stage, you might begin to analyze your highlights. So if you're putting highlights on, this guy is standing next to a yellow ochre building. I might make that building darker. I'm going to take a little bit of burnt umber and just right behind him, make it a little darker. And I'm going to blend that in a little bit. Put a little yellow ochre above it and blend that back in. Now let's go back to his head and straighten his head out, because his head was not showing up very well. But by having a darker background, then when I take Naples and white and put my little highlight on him, all of a sudden you notice it more because it's against a dark background. Whereas before, that was more of yellow ochre, and Naples is pretty close to yellow ochre. It just didn't show up. Now, I am going to pull out a piece of paper and talk about how to add people, because you might have a great, I mean, I've driven down Clarendon and seen really beautiful umbrellas in front of a restaurant, but there's nobody sitting out there. So you snap a picture and then you can add people later. We'll come back to this in a minute, but let's look at some people now and how to do people. One of the things you want to do is remember that if they're standing up, that heads, I mean, a person is about 8 heads tall. So let's say you were going to put, let's say you were going to put a waiter in the painting somewhere. I always like to start with the head, because to me, I know not all artists do this, some of them start with the body, but I like to start with the head because at least I know this is the top of where this person is going to be. And if I have other people standing up, their heads are going to be sort of in the same range like that. They're not going to be down here unless it's a little kid. So we'll do a waiter standing up first. And waiters can have different outfits on, but we're going to make him have, well, the problem is I'm painting on white paper, so I'm going to use like a light blue just so, for his white shirt, and then he's going to have a black vest on. So here's his white shirt. Here's his shoulders. Think of it as a rectangle. And I usually try to just kind of think of it as a rectangle. His hips are going to be, maybe he has an apron on, his hips are going to be sort of a square. And then his legs are going to be down here. And halfway is the pubic bone. So this is about halfway. That's how you know how long to make the legs. Now, let's fill him in. And then the arms you're going to add. But let's fill him in. First, we'll give him some hair. Take a little bit of burnt umber. And we're going to do him from the back. Here's the back of his head. And he's got a black vest on. So I'm going to take blue and brown and make a black. So here's his vest. And he's going to have a white apron on that ties in the back. So I'm going to use, again, sort of a bluish color so you can see his white apron. Because, you know, white isn't always pure white. So here's his apron. We're going to make it come down really low on his pants. But it's split in the back because it ties in the back. So here's part of the apron. And we'll make it whiter in a minute. And then here's the other part that's just peeking on this side of his leg. And then we've got black pants on too. So in here, here's his black pants. And here's one leg here. And here's the other leg peeking out over here. And a suggestion, it's probably a little too big, but suggestion of his foot. And let's give him some arms again. He has a white shirt on, so I'm going to use this sort of gray down color first to put in his arm. Maybe he's got maybe this arm is coming over here and cutting back in. Now, we can adjust this by, we want to make it look a little whiter, so you could come back in and use sort of a white with just a little bit of cerulean and make the shirt a little lighter in places. And you could also, if we had something in the background, you could give him a little highlight so that his top of his head looks like it's catching light on the top. And it's a suggestion. It's not a a portrait or somebody who's modeled for you and you've done their figure. It's just a suggestion. And yet, because of the apron and this being in a scene like this, everybody's going to know he's the waiter. Now, suppose you have somebody sitting down. Let's put a person right next to him. He's waiting on somebody here. So how do you decide, where is this person's head? Well, first of all, you have to say, where does the table hit in relation to his body? If you're standing at your kitchen table, where does that table hit you? And I would say it probably hits you somewhere maybe about right here. Okay? The top of the table, whether it's daytime or night with lights on, is probably going to be very light. So I'm going to use a little Naples and white. Here's the top of the table. The side of the table, which is, let's say it has a white tablecloth, you're going to have a little more of a blue-gray side to the tablecloth. However, notice how some of these corners are catching light. So sometimes at the corner, you might see a little lighter color. I'm using Naples and white again so you can see it on this white paper. Okay, so there's a little corner. And again, I would say come back with a little highlight and put a little highlight on these things. So now we have a person sitting at the table. So where is their head in relationship to the top of the table? Well, you don't want to put their head right next to the top of the table because then it looks like they're reaching under the table because they dropped their napkin or something. So we want their head to be probably about right here, let's say. And here's their shoulders. And let's say they have a, I don't know what color, let's say whatever color this is, a red shirt on. And again, think of it as sort of a rectangle that's going behind the table so we don't see it all. Maybe they have their arms coming out sitting on the table, or maybe not. And again, add some hair. The hair always helps. And we probably are going to see something under the table. Either the tablecloth comes all the way down to the floor, or you're going to see table legs. And where do they hit? Well, they've got to hit somewhere pretty close to where his feet are. I mean, if he's in front, they'll be a little shorter, but they've got to be somewhere in here. But we also got to see something of this person's legs down here. And you don't have to give a lot of detail, just, suggestion. And that will be fine. But now you've got, somebody interacting with somebody else. Or you could have two people, like here, sitting at the table interacting. Once you've got your basic thing down, that's when you can go back and have a lot more fun, because you can come in here and you can start putting some highlights on their shirt, on the top of the table. You could even have a wine glass here. For the highlight of the black vest, I might use cerulean blue and just put a little hint of a lighter color right up there just so it looks like something's hitting there, a little lighter. Doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be spelled out perfectly. But suggestion is actually, I think, a lot more fun and also less stressful in the sense that you can outline, like if you want to outline the edge of his arm just so you can see what's happening, you can do that. But keep it simplified. Don't add a lot of Don't get in there and do faces. Don't get in there and try to put 5 fingers on the person's hand. If the person has their hand showing, what I would do is just do a little suggestion of their hand. Just like that. That's fine. Don't get in there. Same with this. A little suggestion of the hand on the table. All right. The other thing with people, though, is you must anchor them to the ground. And so whenever you have people, whether they're standing or sitting, ask yourself, which way is the light coming? Obviously, we've drawn it so the light's coming from this way because we have the light tablecloth. So again, under the table, maybe he's casting a shadow. Maybe this guy's casting a shadow. Get a little shadow down to suggest the waiter. Get a little shadow down to show under the table is a little darker. But this helps anchor them so that they're not floating in the air. Now that's true of anything that touches the ground. I mean, the pots have to be anchored. If you had a garden with a tree, the tree would have to be anchored. Everything that touches down, where these touch down, really, there should be a slight touch of darkness under each chair leg to make it sit down. Another thing you want to do too is compare. We got white next to white. So maybe maybe make it a little darker on the tablecloth right here, and you can just kind of fuzz it out a little bit, let it soften and end up into the lighter color. But what it does is it separates him from the table, so that when you have two things that are sort of similar in color, we can see the difference between one and the other, because one is catching light and one isn't. And that would be true of, things in here too. People, I think, add a lot of interest to a painting, and the reason is, I read something one time I thought was very interesting. It said that that the eye is attracted to life forms, whether it's birds, whether it's animals. Like Gerda suggested putting a little dog in here. That could be really cute, like people bring their dogs to these. That adds more of a story, more of something that you connect with. I mean, when you look at a scene like this, if it's an empty cafe, it's not as appealing as if there's people there. Or let's say you had an empty cafe and just a waiter kind of standing there like waiting for business. That's more interesting because the life form helps tell the story of this. So keep that in mind and don't avoid paintings and thinking, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't want to put a person in there. You need to practice them. And really, you could take a piece of, I just was using cardstock, that heavyweight paper, and you could practice just doing little doodles of people. What I do a lot of times is when I read the newspaper and there's a picture, even if it's in black and white or if it's in color, and I just love the position that person is in, I tear that out. Because that's a great thing to just, when you're doodling, practice drawing that person's gesture, that position of their arms and their legs and their movement of their spine. People don't always stand straight up and tall. Sometimes they're bending over. And that's a great way to practice with just well-taken photographs. If they're in the newspaper, they're well taken. And usually there's a good light source. So you have a light side and a dark side, which of course always helps make it easier. But that's a good way to practice doing people. And you don't have to do it with a paintbrush. If you're ever on the phone waiting, like on, with the music in the background waiting for somebody to pick up your call, have a little sketch pad and just pick out something in the newspaper or a magazine of a person and just with a pencil sketch them. Don't sit there and draw their outline. Just draw, color in a circle, oval for their head, color in a rectangle for their body, color in a little square for their hip area, and then draw 2 like long cylinders for their legs, and then go back in and refine that. And you'll find that you start capturing the gesture of the person and not worried about, okay, how long is this arm long enough? Or do more of the gesture part first and get that down. Then you can go back and refine. Same with blocking in. I mean, when you block them in, capture the gesture. If you want, you could paint the whole person with just one color, head, body, everything. Let it dry, and then come back in and fill in the color and refine it. And you'll find that you get a nice look that way. Now, if everybody wants to unmute, I can take some questions. I will unpin myself. There. Okay.
Jane, this is Diane. Where would you put a waiter in this picture?
So if I wanted to put a waiter in this picture, I mean, usually waiters are helping people. You could do them on the other side of the people, you know. You could, if this dark doorway bothers you, you could have a waiter standing in the doorway surveying the land to see where does he need to go help somebody. You could put someone here. The only problem is if he's facing this way, he might pull the eye out a little bit. You got to be careful that you're not pulling the. I would not put him way over here because if he's got white on, he's going to attract attention. You could put him maybe. I don't know. I'll tell you the other thing you can do is get a piece of transparent. What do they call that stuff? That's transparency, and let your painting dry. Put it on top and draw the waiter in, and then move them around to see where you want to put them. I do that a lot. I want to add something, but I'm not sure where I want to add them. So I'll do it I just put the piece of plastic over it once it's dry, paint right on it, and then move him around. And that always looks very interesting. Any other questions? Now, I think for those of you that started a cafe scene, I mean, you really did a knockout job on the block, and I was very impressed. That's the hardest part. This part of doing the refinement, actually, you notice how quickly I put stuff on. I didn't spend a lot of time nitpicking it. I just put highlights on. I put suggestions in there. I put suggestions of squiggly writing. That type of thing. I think what I will do with this one, I'm going to think of a different name. I don't even know what it is, La Table d'Anglaise. I'm not crazy about that either. So I'm going to have to think of something else. But, I mean, you can put whatever you want, like I said. I'm going to make a little darker color right here on this. I just noticed this satchel. A little darker right there. All right, maybe even put the little strap so that you know what this thing is. Maybe a little handle. There's a little handle on it. Because otherwise, sometimes you put things in like that, and people say, well, what's that dark thing? So if you do this, then they know, oh, it's somebody's briefcase. All right, any other questions? I really do want to see what you do, and I hope you'll post them on Facebook. This is the last class for this session. We have a 3-week break, and then we start up again, I think it's the 14th of April. In the meantime, for those of you that have signed up, I'm going to send you and ask you, I mean, some of you have already gotten it, but I'm going to send you an email saying, give me suggestions of what you want to do this semester, and then you write back and tell me what you want to do so that we can plan. I'll put it out to everybody. Here are the choices. Pick your top 3, and then we'll pick some out. I am going to try to...
I just looked on the website, so you only have like the Drew Elementary School indoor class?
No, I have 2 things. I have the in-person class, which is at Drew, and he did not write this up correctly, but it's every other week for 4 weeks. So 1 week, Group A will have class, then they'll have a week break. And when they have their week break, Group B will have their class, and then they'll have a week break. So it's kind of back and forth, back and forth. But there is an online class too. And the online class, it's actually going to move to Wednesday, so that this was Raul's idea. If we had class on Wednesday online, some people might want to take both, and then they can do what we did online in class. So I am going to kind of coordinate those weeks that they overlap, that we do the same project in class that we're doing online.
So it's on Wednesdays at what time?
Same time, 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock. And then the in-person class, there's 2 times. There's a 10 o'clock in the morning, and there's a 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jane?
Yeah.
In the cafe scene, would you put anything on the table?
Yeah.
Like glass?
Yeah, I think it would make more sense to do that. And again, all you have to do, let's say we want to put a little wine glass here. Get out your little skinny round brush and make a little, well, that didn't show up. Let me make it a little lighter. A little white with a little bluish in it. And let's see, it's got to touch that table, so we can't make it too high. Do a little half moon shape. and this is a wine glass that he's going to be holding. You do something like that. You could put food on the table, or a little potted flowers, or whatever you want. I mean, one of the things about when you have a photograph, it's a suggestion, and then you can add to that. You can embellish